All right. Welcome, everyone, to a workshop that is being hosted by the Icelandic Women's Rights Association in cooperation with CESI in Croatia. This workshop is a part of the project Working Woman, Gender Equality in the Labour Market, and financially supported by the Active Citizen Fund in Croatia. Today, we are going to be hearing a feminist critique of the Icelandic government's economic response to COVID-19, and it's the Icelandic feminist budget group Femínísk fjármál who are going to be presenting on this topic. And I would like to welcome Finnborg, Steinunn, and Steinunn, who are going to be presenting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brynhildur. I think we agreed on that I would start the presentation. However, there is the issue of who is going to share the slides. We hadn't discussed that, but I am trying to share them with you now. So maybe I'll just at least start with the sharing. That would be best. Okay. Yes.
In the right corner.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to start by saying I'm very happy to be here. My name is Steinunn, and we're here on the behalf of our group, Feminist Fjármál, which is a feminist budget group in Iceland. And we're here to present our feminist critique of COVID-19 economic measures in Iceland. And with me are Finnborg and Steinunn, my colleagues in the group. So just a little bit about us. Our goal and our purpose is to promote gender equality in economic policies of the government and the parliament. And we want to utilize public finance to create a more feminist and a just society. We are from the roots of a feminist group who want to influence, and we want to influence how economic policies are so that they benefit or everyone better and influence the designing and outcomes of these policies to become better for all genders and people in different social circumstances, and especially those who are vulnerable and those that are at risk of being overlooked or forgotten when money and power are distributed in society. We also focus on bringing gender budgeting and its importance to the public's attention and generate discussion and awareness on the topic. From 2018, we have been given we've been sending letters and appearing for committees to discuss this with members of the parliament and the government. And so we are very enthusiastic about this. And in 2020 and 2021, the group has analyzed the government's economic response to the COVID-19 pandemic from a feminist perspective. And for this purpose, we got a grant from the Icelandic Gender Equality Fund in June 2020. And we focused our efforts on analyzing the measures that were put in place or introduced in 2020. The group's analysis has emphasized that the economic policies and measures taken by the government and the Congress in Iceland are not gender sensitive enough, and they also have the downside of being perceived to be gender neutral, when in fact the gendered impact of these policies flies under the radar and is unnoticed by the authorities. And then in this sense, we are especially pointing out those vulnerable groups that I mentioned earlier that are overlooked and lose out on the economic policies and public funding. And on top of that, we also have pointed out many times that too often gender analysis which is done within the system, does not improve the policies in the end. There are very qualified people to do gender analysis within the system, but if it doesn't influence the politics of the policies, those who are taking the decisions or making the decisions, the point of the analysis will be completely lost. So this is what we have generally pointed out regarding the economic response to the COVID-19 pandemic from our feminist perspective. And we published our results earlier this year on our webpage and covered it very successfully, as we think, in the media. And we want to tell you more about the specifics of that analysis now. And to do that, I'm going to pass the ball over to my colleagues now. So I was wondering, maybe I should stop sharing and my colleagues should start?
I think you should continue.
Keep sharing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be good. Oh.
Okay, then we're off to the next one.
Yeah. Hi. So yes, we'll start with employment and unemployment, and just tell you a little bit about our critique and our analysis. So in Iceland, the COVID economic crisis hit tourism and service sectors the hardest. And as Iceland's economy has become more and more dependent on tourism in the last few years, this was the biggest hit in terms of the COVID crisis. These industries, they are largely employed by women, foreign workers, young people, students, and those are the groups that generally have less scope to deal with and respond to economic shocks because of their socioeconomic status, and are therefore more vulnerable to job and income loss. This group is very different from the group that was hit the hardest during the financial crisis in 2008, but still some of the measures that were intended to be employment generating were similar to the ones used in the last crisis. An example of this is a measure that was called Everybody Works. That's what the government called it. It was a measure that was aimed at reimbursing value-added tax for construction projects, car repairs, renovations, and maintenance of buildings and homes. And during the 2008 crisis, this measure was intended to give people in the construction industries jobs due to the lack of investment. But to us, it is quite obvious that the vast majority of these jobs, the jobs that were created by this measure, would be done by men, as more than 90% of the people in these industries are men. So if you look at the group of people who lost their jobs in this crisis, this measure was not very beneficial in creating jobs. In our analysis, we point out that the measure could have easily been extended to the work of the beauty industry, hairdressing, sewing services, and other industries and services dominated by women. Another measure that was the government did was to extend the income-related unemployment benefit, which is usually available for 3 months, but was extended to 6. But due to the gender pay gap that we still have here in Iceland, this measure benefits men rather than women. This is a lesson we should have learned from the financial crisis, when men received almost 70% of the income-related benefits. So we pointed out that the general unemployment benefits needed to be raised, and the general benefit period needed to be extended to prevent people from falling into poverty. So if we skip to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, then it is just a general question of whether government funding is going where it's needed to or not. And this COVID crisis is anything but a typical economic crisis, especially here in Iceland, I think. So only a few sectors were severely hit, and they were hit by a complete drop in income, and their employees lose their jobs. And as mentioned, these employees are women, students, foreign workers, young people in low income sectors. However, many of the measures taken in response to the economic impact of the pandemic, they aimed at stimulating the economy through both monetary and fiscal policy. And were in fact very typical economic crisis responses. And they were often too general. So one example is a temporary allowance to the public to withdraw their private pension savings. The aim here was to enable individuals and households to use their own savings to meet like a temporary downturn, but a pretty deep one, and kind of use their own savings to increase spending. This measure is more suitable for those who have been longer on the labor market, working full-time jobs and with an average income or higher. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to work part-time. They generally have lower income. They take more time off from paid work due to heavier care burden. And women therefore generally have lower personal pension savings than men. And for people in vulnerable position, withdrawing your pension savings early can also have a severe impact on your income later in life, if you're lucky enough to have any personal pension savings. One other example is a measure called the travel gift. It was an action taken to support the Icelandic tourism industry, which was the industry that was the hardest hit. And it was a grant from the government to households to spend specifically in tourist and service sectors that were hit, and to increase the demand domestically. It is though now clear that the capital ended up in the hands of companies that were not significantly affected and are now even in a stronger position due to this travel gift. And this is oil companies, international restaurant chains, and such. So the point here is that the measures taken needed to be more specific and strategic to reach the people in need. And I'll let Finnborg take over.
Yes, I'm gonna tell you about the investments of the government's investments, and our biggest critique is that they invested in a lot of concrete. So this was an employment generating measures, and it was 18 billion Icelandic kronas in 2020. That is approximately 122 million euros. In Iceland, that's a lot of money. Well, we are a small country, but still it's huge amount of money, and they're planning on investing 120 or 19 billion in the years 2020 to 2025. What we see that the investment went mostly into transport infrastructure, new construction, major renovation projects, property maintenance and improvements, energy exchanges, and IT projects. And as Steinunn Braga mentioned earlier, these are jobs that are mainly performed by men. And another issue that we have with this, of course, it's good that we are investing in these infrastructures, but as an employment generating measure, we critique it for, generating employment for men mostly, but also most of the funds, large part of the cost goes to supplies and funds that leave the country. So we point out that investment efforts must not be limited to concrete, that we have to do more. We have to invest in social and healthcare services. which are likely to create a lot of jobs, jobs that are more likely to be done by women. And most of the cost goes into people's wages that then again goes back into our economy. In the next slide, I also wanted to, yeah, you can push forward. Yeah, it was not supposed to be like this, but yeah. I also wanted to share with you another example of investment, and that's the investment in innovation, research, and knowledge, but I'm going to focus mostly on innovation. There was a 70% increased funding to innovation, research, and knowledge last year in response to COVID-19. And the aim was to promote development, growth, and increased competitiveness of the Icelandic economy. The aim was to diversify the economy. So the government put a lot of money into different funds, innovation funds and startup funds. And they also had this loans, a matching loan for new startups. This they did, even though they know that these measures are known to serve men better than women. So what we argue or point towards is that there's two sides of this argument, like the justice and fairness argument. Why isn't the government working towards their objective of gender equality that they have put forward in the Gender Equality Act, and also in the Act on Public Finances, where it says that they have to implement gender, or work towards gender budgeting? So if we know that these measures are going to be serving men more than women, why aren't we, you know, changing them or doing some counter measures to respond to that? Also, what we argue is that the Icelandic, the nation, the society is losing the source of innovation and talent. We're only investing in half of the talent, you know, and this group is not that diverse according to our sources. So we're losing on opportunities and benefits. And I wanted to show you the stuðningskría, the matching loans. And as you can see there, that these are the statistics for board of directors, directors, and founders. And we see there that none of the companies, of the 24 companies that were funded or got these matching loans, had only board of women on the boards. However, 40% had only men on the boards. The directors were only in around half of the companies were from a mixed group of directors and women, and half only men. And then the founders, 2/3 of the founders were men. So if we look at the total numbers on the next slide, you can see the numbers of people behind that. You can see that men are in majority of the companies that get these resources. So this was a clear example. So we know that these measures that the government is taking is not any different from those that have already been done before. And we actually have written a article in Vísbending, a journal here in Iceland, arguing for other approaches. For example, the gender bias approach of what is innovation, how do we define innovation? Is that maybe biased and therefore serving men? Should we maybe rethink that? We should make special funds to, you know, encourage that are specially designed for women and fields where women are working in, etc., etc. And yeah, we were looking forward to the government responding to that in the future, hopefully. Next slide, please. What's there? Yeah. So we also wanted to mention, of course, that now that the government has been spending a lot of money on the economic response, we always have this austerity threat, you know, hanging over us. And even though it hasn't been introduced, to my knowledge, and we know that this has a very negative effect on the service users and also the employers there. So we need to focus on that even though if we cut down the services there, this the need for the social infrastructures will continue to exist. And we know from the previous experiences and the theory that this work and responsibilities will move into the homes and mostly on the shoulders of women. And this will have negative consequences of women participation in the labor market, which is known to have negative impact on economic growth, the financial security, but also it puts women in vulnerable position against violence and other abuse within their homes. So we need to nurture, that was my first word, but cultivate maybe, but nurture is more, feminine. We need to nurture these social infrastructures and to contribute to this, to women's and the employment, participation and security of all people in society. So this is something that we are, presenting regularly to the government. So Steinunn.
Yes, I had to unmute myself. Okay. So we're nearing to the end, but we can't, skip talking about valuing women's paid and unpaid work. Most research regarding housework and care suggests women take more responsibility than men do. We know this. And the research also suggests that the workload regarding housework and care has increased during this pandemic. In some countries, this is having very serious results, such as in the United States, where women are leaving or disappearing from the labor market and into the homes because of the pandemic. And this is making them, of course, economically vulnerable, since the care work they are disappearing from the paid labor market to take care of. This care work is unpaid, the care work in the homes. And the same goes for Iceland in the sense that compared to other European countries, Iceland has the highest ratio of persons taking care of sick, disabled, or old and fragile relatives. And that is time-consuming, unpaid work, which influences the opportunities for paid work and subsequently income, of course, but it has also effects on work stamina. And we've been discussing in Iceland burnout a lot in the last couple of years. So it definitely influences that. And also work development, or as you can say, pay raises and opportunities to move up in your field of expertise. So it is very important during this pandemic that measures during the pandemic don't increase the gendered imbalance of unpaid work, which is already in place. And we need to work on that as a long-time issue. But the threat in this pandemic is that that pandemic will make it more imbalanced. And so it is very important that we design all our measures so that it doesn't influence this in the wrong direction. And it has been essential that schools have stayed open during the pandemic, for the most part at least. And that this has alleviated the parents, mostly, well, based on the research, it would have more effects for mothers than fathers. It has alleviated them from having to homeschool children on top of the increased workload that we are seeing in the home because of the family members staying more in the home than usual. But still some good measures that were introduced by the government, they have failed to include everyone that needed support, leaving the most vulnerable behind, unfortunately. And what I'm talking about here is pay guarantee during quarantine, which was a very important measure to prevent negative economic impact of the pandemic prevention put in place by the authorities. So you could, if you had to quarantine, you had some pay guarantee so that you wouldn't be hit badly economically while you were doing your duty to quarantine and protect everyone around you and your society from possible infection of this high moments of the pandemic. And this, of course, is really important because it is more likely that people would break quarantine if they needed to work, if their economic safety was in danger. So this was very important and a very good measure from the government. However, the measure did not include parents that needed to isolate themselves with kids or teenagers that have a disability or are or long-time illnesses, and would have to in times the last two winter, last spring and last winter, needed to isolate themselves because they are just so vulnerable that they would have become more sick if they would have contracted the disease, or also because services sometimes were lacking because of the pandemic, because of the then more strict provisions made. So these parents that didn't qualify for the pay guarantee would have to rely on sympathetic employer, which is, of course, not something everyone has. And so we pointed out that pay guarantee during quarantine could have included parents that needed to isolate with the kids. And such guarantee should have, it would have needed to be on individual basis and in alienable, so we couldn't, pass it on, so that mothers wouldn't end up leaving the workplace disproportionately to take care of this issue compared to fathers. So that is what we have pointed out, specifically regarding women's unpaid work, especially. And then we are coming to our conclusions in this talk and in our analysis. And I just wanted to go over the biggest challenges. There are, of course, very many big challenges regarding gender equality now because of the COVID pandemic and its influences. And in Iceland, the biggest issues are the impacts of unemployment and on the welfare system, the future welfare cuts, and women's health and economic safety. And the government's economic response is gender biased, as we go thoroughly through in our analysis, and it benefits men more than women. This is pointed out in our budget group analysis. So, and we have pointed out to the government, so the government is aware and has an opportunity to do better, an opportunity that we sometimes feel that they should make more of. For example, they recently renewed the travel gift that Steinunn was talking about earlier, and didn't change it so that it would become better, which is a disappointment for us. And although it does have massive positive impact that schools have stayed open for the most part, more needs to be done so that the economic policies benefit all genders, particularly in regards of creating job opportunities and prevent poverty. And one of the most vital issues is providing satisfying wages and work conditions for people who work in welfare, schools and healthcare, majority of whom are women. So potential welfare cuts would put their working conditions under pressure, leading to mounting pressure on the people themselves, and as to those that are receiving the service and the care. And that has also gendered implications, because if a service is cut or strained in the welfare, school or healthcare system, the need for care, of course, does not disappear. It just moves from the public arena into the private arena. And it goes into the homes, and most often on the shoulders of the women in the families, who will do more unpaid labor. And the danger of such an extra strain on women in regards to their health, and subsequently also on the chances of economic prosperity and independence, is very real, and that must be taken seriously. So that is in the core of our critique, or this feminist critique of the COVID-19 measures, economic measures of the Icelandic authorities. And so we have come to this conclusion, and I'm gonna stop sharing the slides now, and I hope we can have a good talk for the rest of the time, and questions, and we will do our best to answer them.
Well, thank you, Steinunn and Finnborg. These are like your analysis of the response of the Icelandic government to COVID is incredibly shocking, and I know it has shocked a lot of people here in Iceland. I want to maybe jumpstart the discussion with one question, which I've been thinking a lot about since you published your report, and it's the fact, sort of like, what does it matter? Like, what does legislation matter? One of the things that we've been very proud of here in Iceland is that the government has, for the past 5 years, guaranteed that we've had rules in place that all major legislation and budgets should be gender analyzed. Does it matter? Like, you know, is this like, why did this happen? So like, is it, should we have been fighting for this law? Like, should we be recommending to other countries that they should pass rules like that?
Well, it does matter. I would definitely say that it does matter that the influence of laws and the influence of them, that everything that the parliament and the government is doing, analyzing that from a gender perspective, is very important, but it's only a part of the solution. So if you have the analysis and you don't follow up on it, you don't react on it, you don't look at it and say, okay, this is a clear example of something that I need to change, that we need to change, we need to do things differently, or we need to have some other measures to counter what we're doing here. If you don't do that, if you don't take that step, the analysis is, well, it's good to have it, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for, practical equality in the end. So it is first and foremost a political problem. Like I said in the start, we have very qualified people to do gender analysis inside the institutions that are servicing the parliament and the government, and that is not the problem. The problem is politic, to act on the information that they have. I don't know if my colleagues want to add anything to that. I think we fairly agree on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I just wanted to add that we have gender experts within the government that are doing great work. So I just want to stress that we have this analysis because we have these colleagues doing this good job within. And one of them is here, Marta Birna. She just turned on her camera. She's the gender budgeting expert at the Ministry of Finance. So yeah, she's one of those colleagues.
Thanks. And if I might just comment on this, thanks for the analysis. And I completely agree with what you have to say, that legislation by itself doesn't change everything, but it's also a very important tool for us to have that are working within the government. So when we are trying to get, all the different line ministries to cooperate with us, everybody to do their part, it's really vital to have that, the law says that we have to do this. So it helps us in our work. But as you said, it is really, that it needs to come from the politicians, the buy-in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a part of what we do, the Feminist Budgeting group, is also that we are trying to raise awareness about the gendered implications of the provisions made and laws passed and so on, and having gender specialists that are working towards analyzing the laws and the budget and so on. It's very helpful in trying to draw out what are the gendered influences that we can bring attention to, so that the public is more aware, and ultimately it's the public that chooses the politicians. So if they are made more aware of these issues, we think it creates a more pressure on the politicians, and maybe that will generate some change. But also we would really just like more engagement from the politicians in this regard.
I think if I can add shortly, I think that's one of our biggest roles, is to draw the politicians' attention to the gender biases that we know of because of the work that is done within a ministry. So we are always voicing, pointing out, you have this information, why aren't you, reacting on it? Why aren't you changing the outcome of those policies and decision making? So I think at least I see our role as supporting the good work that is done in the government, within the government offices, to push for the politicians, connect them to the politicians, because they have can be completely ignorant of this, or not ignorant, but more how do you say, not interested, and therefore it's the slice of the radar. So I think this is, at least I see this as an important role.
And I want to open up the floor to any participant in this workshop if they have a comment or a question. I myself have 8 post-it notes all over my desk that I'm ready to jump in, but I see that we only have 15 more minutes, so please jump in if you have any questions.
If I may, I'll try to be very short. It's just more of a commentary. Thank you very much. Your presentation was really interesting. It is interesting that also in the workshops on Monday and also today, we, contrary to our perceptions, saw that you in Iceland really have similar problems that we have in Croatia. So all of these things that you said, I'm just now referring to the last discussion, we really have also good laws. We can always improve them. And that is also due to the fact that we became part of the European Union quite late. So we really had to make our laws really good. But the main problem is they're really not enforced in practice. And also we don't have any gender budgeting. We are trying now on local levels to raise awareness about these questions and really kind of engage our politicians in all of the questions regarding gender equality, but mainly they're only focused on violence, and that is due to the ratification of Istanbul Convention. So in Croatia, when we have some international documents or European Union directives, that is the only mechanism that kind of works, at least did for now. So in regard of gender equality in labor market, we have some directives of the European Union that touch upon or are discuss work-life balance and gender pay gap. So now we think that because we have an obligation to, transfer this international laws, that we are going to see some improvements, but still I am afraid that in practice this will really not have much effect. Because Croatia, you were talking about politics, we do have laws, but we don't really have any politics that systematically address any problems that concern gender equality in the labor market. And as a part of our project, Working Women, we're really trying to form a bigger initiative that is going to advocate for these changes. In regards to the COVID pandemic, another problem in Croatia is that we really don't have statistics, especially official statistics, and it's really hard to get some data. But we do know that in the last year, registered employment increased for around 17%, and 10% more women were affected more than men. When we look it in total. But when we look at fixed term contracts, we can see that people who became employed and who were working on fixed term contracts, 62% of them were women. So this is you were talking about all of these discriminations, and problems that women face in the labor market, and it's also the same in Croatia. And when we look at unemployment in the last year, 40% more women than men became unemployed. And a lot of problems, as you were also talking, were in regards to the work-life balance and unavailability of childcare services like schools and kindergartens, because our ombudswoman for gender equality actually saw an increase of discrimination claims that were sent to her, especially in regards to work-life balance matters. And also, this is also due to COVID, but in the last year, we saw a 50% decrease in fathers taking parental leave in Croatia, and which is in Croatia, even in normal times, very little, only 8% of fathers take parental leave. And in last year, it was only 4%. So I don't really, I hope the situation will get better. But, I just wanted to say we really have the same problems all over the place. So thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too long.
No, it was not too long. It was very enlightening, and I'm very interested in hearing about these issues that you have, that are the same that we have here in Iceland. And I think it is kind of a constant worry for the feminists in Iceland that policies that are being implemented, they look good on paper, but they tend to maybe serve as alibis and don't affect real change. So that is a common headache for us feminists worldwide, I think.
I think I'm going to jump in. I know I'm supposed to be a moderator, but this is such an interesting discussion, so I'm going to jump in with a point, because what I was really struck with what Lana was saying about using international obligations to force our governments to do the right thing, and because we have also had this problem here in Iceland. So, for example, when we look at our parental leave, when we were originally trying to get parental leave passed in the 80s, sort of like we were looking towards EU directives, right, like that, and sort of like, and so we have all these improvements that we've been making to our labor market, even if we're not a part of the EU, we're a part of the EEA. So, for example, our current discrimination legislation came directly from the in the European Economic Area. So, and I think sort of like this is maybe something that we feminists can need, maybe should sort of like work together to share knowledge about how we can use those international obligations that our governments have to use them as pressure points. Because I know, for example, from my work, I very rarely use international obligations. I use the argument of fairness and justice, and I hope that they will take that, that obviously everyone should understand and want to be fair and just, but people really don't. So I think maybe we need to organize a workshop, just like an intense training workshop. How do we effectively use international obligations of governments as activists to pressure our governments into doing the fair and just thing?
Yes, maybe that will be awesome workshop also. Let's think about who can give it to us, you know, who has the best experience. Thank you very much. It was very, very interesting to see the presentation. I have really some, just few questions if you can answer it. So in the beginning of the presentation, I saw Icelandic Gender Equality Fund, and then it triggered my curiosity. What is it actually? How it's functioning?
So this is a fund from the government.
Yeah.
So the government, maybe Master Birna should tell us about it. You have.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the expert. So it's the Prime Minister's office, which is also responsible for gender equality. The fund was established in 2015 at the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. And it was meant to, intended as to be temporary. The certain funding put into it. So it has been made sort of semi-permanent, I think, but with less funding provided each year. But so it's, you know, anybody can apply with a project that's somehow meant to promote gender equality in Iceland.
Okay, so basically it is for the project.
Yeah.
Okay, super.
And this we applied as an awareness raising campaign about, so an analysis of the economic response and awareness campaign that Steinunn told you about, that we find that was quite successful in March.
Yeah, super. Thank you. Okay, can I ask one more question? No, I think two. So I was also very interested in this measure with withdrawing of private pensions, pension saving fund. So I think I didn't see from all the communication we had with colleagues from Europe, I didn't stumble upon this type of measure. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's very interesting. So do you maybe do you maybe know how many people actually used it? Because as you said, it depends on, I mean, this is completely going into private savings, and okay, now we are giving you the opportunity to use this money, if I understood correctly, the measure. But do you maybe know how many people actually used it, and what was the reaction of the people when they, if it was any reaction in media or, you know, having a coffee talking about it, you know?
Well, this is not the first time this has been done. This was, I think it started after the economic crisis, and it has been used a couple of times after that to as a special measure from the government. And as you said, it benefits men more than women, because they are more likely to have put money into it and have therefore larger amounts that they can withdraw from that. It was for a very long time used to so that people could use it to buy their first property. So it's a measure that has a kind of a history in Iceland for the last decade or so. Yeah,
I think,
but I don't know how many. I don't know how many used it now.
Now in the COVID, you don't know. Okay.
There is on the government website. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's just pretty like important to clarify, because like countries have very different pension savings, like or ways of doing the pension savings. So this is only what is called like a Pillar 3 pension. So it's a voluntary private pension saving. So it's different from, like, you're not withdrawing your whole pension savings. It's only a small part of it that belongs to you. But then we have more of a communal fund
Oh, super. Yeah, okay. Now I
So
understand better.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the voluntary pillar.
Yeah. This has
Third
been
one.
quite big. Yeah, it has been used as I think 27 billion Icelandic kronas have been taken out of the pensions, according to the website, and 65% of that money is for men, or from men's pension funds.
Oh yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, we now have on the clock only 3 minutes left. Because I have a huge question for the Femínísk fjármál. But are there any burning questions that sort of like the rest of the guests want to bring up? Anna Maria, I know you have many.
Yeah, 2 more, but nevertheless, we are short. I can always type.
But if everyone is okay, if we have can we extend this for 5 more minutes? We do have the time. Are you okay with that, Steinunn and Finnborg? So Anna Maria, go ahead.
No, okay, yeah. I think I know the answer, but just to hear one more time. So, what would you evaluate as the most useful measure, in this COVID pandemic? So, I could hear that it was leaving the school opening, which it was a big issue, and we talked about that a lot. So, but is that it, or would you say it was also something else crucial for the women?
Well, yeah, it was crucial that the school stayed open, but also it didn't require any real money, in economic measures. You didn't have to put any extra money into it, really, or at least very little. For the schools to stay open, so it's kind of a non-issue in economic analysis, but it was very important. You can't take that away. But there are measures that were very important, such as extending the period of the paying of unemployment wages, and also the pay guarantee in quarantine. I think was important for everyone, regardless of gender or status.
True. Thank you. Now I'm done. Thank you.
My question is actually directly follows up on yours, Anna Maria. I was thinking because I'm just going to move it a bit further ahead, because I think we are now have an unprecedented opportunity in terms of following COVID to envision how our society should be rebuilt. And we've already seen, Steinunn Rögnvaldsdóttir, you mentioned in your talk that, for example, the COVID epidemic had caused huge problems in the United States because so many women had to leave the workplace. But we've now seen that this has already served as a pressure point for the government. So there is already now a plan in works to introduce for the first time parental leave, which had not been, and there are serious discussions that they are also going to be seeing if they could create a preschool system. Again, the only Western country that does not had neither of those systems in place. So we've seen that COVID can serve as some sort of pressure point. As we think about how we want our societies in Iceland and in Croatia, what should we be focusing on? How will we? What is these one or two issues that we should be focusing on to rebuild a fairer, more gender equal economy and society? Huge final question. Yeah. You have 4 minutes.
I'm just going to mention one thing. I think COVID has put cast a light on undervalued work. So on the female-dominated sectors that has been undervalued in the employment market, and I think that's something that has come forward as an important roles in society to maintain society, and think with the COVID experience we must continue to make sure that we value that, we pay these people more money, and for a fairer and more equal society.
Yes, so we sustain the system, because if people are burning out in the system or leaving their jobs in the healthcare or welfare systems to pursue other careers that are better paid, then we will have huge problems in our society. So it's the undervalue of the work done in these systems that Finnborg was mentioning, which I think is in the core of what we need to do better and effectively change, because this status as it is now has been criticized for as long as I can remember being active in politics, the debate, the status of the healthcare system and the welfare system. It's a constant discussion, especially from the point of salary and this being a women-dominated fields. That is a big issue, a big feminist issue. But it is interesting that COVID hasn't put a stop on progress. For example, in mid-COVID, we in Iceland we are taking big steps to shorten the work week, which is very interesting, and also a feminist approach to work life and the balance between work life and private life. So although COVID didn't directly influence that, it shows that we're not stopping. There's still progress, and COVID doesn't stop the good things that we are working towards.
All right. Fantastic. So I want to thank you, Steinunn and Finnborg, for your analysis from the Feminist Budget Group, Femínísk fjármál. And I want to thank CESI in Croatia for organizing this workshop with us. This video is going to be uploaded to YouTube, and I'm going to put the link to Femínísk fjármál's website in the description, where everyone who reads Icelandic or can access Google Translate can read more about the analysis. So thank you so much for participating, and everyone who participated in this discussion. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.